5 mailboxes, smashed, bent, and broken, not by vandals, not by strangers, but by the very patrols hired to protect the neighborhood. Curtis Delaney, a proud black homeowner, filed complaints, begged his HOA for answers, but each time, his words were dismissed like they didn't matter. Until one day, Curtis decided he wouldn't be ignored anymore. What happened next shook the community, turned neighbors against each other, and left everyone asking the same question: how far will a man go when dignity is on the line? Curtis Delaney wasn't the kind of man who asked for much. He worked long hours, came home to his quiet ranch-style house, and took pride in the little things: his freshly cut lawn, his painted fence, and the sturdy white mailbox that stood at the edge of his property. For Curtis, that mailbox wasn't just a place for letters. It was a symbol of stability, of all the years he had worked to own a piece of land he could call his own. Neighbors often waved when he passed, some with genuine respect, others with polite distance. Curtis felt it, an invisible line that seemed to follow him wherever he went. Being one of the few black homeowners in a neighborhood run by a strict HOA, he knew eyes lingered longer on him than on anyone else. Still, he tried to let it go. He had fought too hard for his home to let whispers or stares take that pride away. At first, it was little things: a misplaced notice from the HOA, a strange delay in his mail. Curtis brushed it off, but then came the first broken mailbox, a careless accident, they said. Then another, and another. Soon, 5 stood ruined, each one crushed by the patrol SUVs that circled the streets at night. Curtis filed complaints, called the HOA office, demanded answers. But his words were met with shrugs, excuses, and silence. That's when the frustration turned to something deeper. He realized this wasn't just about a mailbox. It was about being ignored. It was about being treated like he didn't belong. And Curtis was about to make sure they could ignore him no longer. The 6th time Curtis's mailbox was destroyed, something inside him snapped. He stood at the edge of his yard, staring at the bent metal post, the shards of white scattered across the grass. Like broken bones, this wasn't carelessness anymore. This was a message. The HOA patrols rolled through every night, slow and watchful, their headlights cutting across his property like searchlights. They claimed they were protecting the neighborhood, but to Curtis, it felt more like surveillance. The fact that every mailbox in the subdivision stood untouched, except his, told him everything he needed to know. He filed another complaint, but this time, the HOA didn't even bother to respond. Neighbors whispered, some shaking their heads with pity, others smirking as if to say he'd brought it on himself. Curtis felt the weight of isolation pressing harder than ever. He wasn't just being ignored. He was being targeted. Nights grew longer. Every time he heard the low rumble of an SUV outside, his chest tightened. Would it be tonight? Another crash, another reminder that he was an outsider in his own home? He started losing sleep, pacing the halls, glancing out the window at the patrols that seemed to slow down whenever they passed his house. That's when Curtis made a decision. If the HOA wouldn't protect him, he would protect himself. He spent hours researching, measuring, planning. Piece by piece, he began building a mailbox unlike any other, a fortress disguised as a simple post. Reinforced steel, concrete footings, and a design that looked ordinary from the street, but was nearly indestructible. It wasn't just about holding letters anymore. It was about reclaiming his dignity. The night it happened, Curtis was sitting by the window, watching. He heard the engine first, an SUV crawling down the road, its headlights sweeping across his lawn. It slowed, just like always. Then, with a sudden lurch, it swerved. The sickening crunch echoed through the street. But this time, it wasn't his mailbox that gave way. It was the SUV. Metal crumpled, glass shattered, the vehicle jerking to a halt as the reinforced mailbox stood unscathed. Towering like a silent sentinel, Curtis's heart pounded, not with fear, but with a surge of vindication. For the first time, he hadn't been broken. But victory came with consequences. Within hours, rumors spread. Neighbors divided, some calling him reckless, others calling him brave. The HOA demanded answers, trying to paint him as the aggressor and the patrol driver. He threatened lawsuits. Curtis realized this was only the beginning. The mailbox had stood tall. But now the real battle loomed, the fight not just for his property, but for his right to exist without being harassed, targeted, and silenced. The crash echoed like thunder across the quiet street. Curtis rushed outside. His breath sharpened the cold air. The SUV's front end was crushed, steam rising from the hood, headlights flickering weakly against the unbroken mailbox that stood defiantly in the ground. The driver stumbled out, his face twisted in rage, not shame, not apology, but fury. "You did this on purpose," he shouted, his voice echoing through the cul-de-sac. Within minutes, flashing lights painted the neighborhood red and blue. Patrol cars, HOA board members, even curious neighbors spilled out of their homes, whispering, pointing, judging. But Curtis wasn't seen as the victim. He was cast as the villain. An officer stepped toward him, hand hovering near his belt, the weight of suspicion heavy in his stare. They didn't ask why his property had been destroyed 6 times. They didn't ask why complaints had gone unanswered. Instead, they demanded to know what he had done, as if defending his home was a crime. Curtis felt the eyes of the crowd burn into him, half waiting for his downfall, half silently rooting for him, but too afraid to speak. His chest tightened as accusations swirled, each word cutting deeper than the last. He wasn't being judged for a mailbox. He was being judged for daring to stand his ground. The officer's hand shifted closer to his holster. The driver shouted again, demanding Curtis's arrest. And in that moment, Curtis realized the truth. The fight wasn't about steel or concrete. It was about whether his dignity, his right to exist in peace, would survive this night. The air grew thick with tension, every second stretching longer than the last. Would this be the moment they broke him completely, or the moment he proved he could never be silenced? The night ended not with Curtis in handcuffs, but with paperwork arguments and the weight of unspoken truths. The mailbox stood tall, unbroken, while rumors and judgments swirled like wildfire. The HOA filed complaints, neighbors took sides, and lawyers circled like vultures. But through it all, Curtis never backed down. He hadn't built a trap, he had built a boundary, a line in the ground that said, enough. Yet the impact went far beyond metal and concrete. Curtis carried the sting of knowing that his fight for dignity had been twisted into an act of defiance, that when a black man demanded respect, the world was quicker to call him dangerous than to call him right. The scars weren't on the SUV, they were on him, on the years of silence, of being dismissed, of knowing that justice often came last when it came at all. Neighbors whispered, some in awe, some in fear, but others saw something different, a man who refused to be erased. And slowly, a truth emerged that no lawsuit could bury. His story wasn't just about a mailbox. It was about survival in a system designed to test him at every turn. Curtis's stand became more than his own. It became a mirror, reflecting a reality too many live daily, a reality where dignity is questioned, voices are silenced, and justice is delayed. The question isn't whether Curtis was right to defend his home. The question is why he had to fight so hard just to be heard at all. And as the dust settled, one truth remained. This story could happen anywhere, to anyone. The real question is, when it does, will we stand silently on the sidewalk, or will we finally stand together?